Oh, you surprised me. You need to warn me before you click on a video. I was just playing around with this fun little height map thingy-majing. But since you are here, I can show you how I made it. Hello guys, gals, and NBs. Let's have some fun with interactive height maps, and some displacement shenanigans. It's actually a very simple network, but it has some punch and a lot of possibilities. And it's using the same underlying technique as my particle fluid sim, just in a different way. Let's get started with an empty project. Let's drop down a ramp. And let's make it circular. Let's swap places and make it so the white is in the middle and black is on the outside. Let's make it ease in and out. And set the extend mode to 0. Let's also bring down the alpha on the outside, and set the value to 1. In the middle, the alpha and value is 1. You can use the period to change the size. Let's set the resolution with a constant chop. Let's be fancy, and name this channel SimRes. I'm going with 480, it doesn't need to be that high. Drag and drop that to the resolution of the ramp. And the pixel format is 32-bit float mono, plus alpha. Let's start setting up a feedback loop. A null, that we call start. Chuck it into a feedback top. And a null that we call feedback end. Let's assign that to the feedback. And a keyboard in to reset the feedback loop. Most of the work is going to happen in a displace top. So let's drop that down here. I'm going to change the source midpoint to 0. And change the vertical source to green. Now in a separate track. Let's add a slope top. We need both the red and green channel, so let's change it to 32-bit float red and green. Let's set the green channel to vertical luminance. And let's keep the blue at 0. Set the 0 point to 0. Chuck that into the second input of the displace, and this happens. That's a little too intense. Let's use a blur. Before the slope. Let's have a large filter size like 32. And a pre-shrink of 2. And I'm gonna use a Gaussian blur, the performance police can arrest me if they want. I think it's prettier. And we now have smoother movement. Let's use a noise, after the ramp. Under output, set the alpha to input. And set the R, G, B to input times noise. Now, if we change the offset to 0, and amplitude to 1, we get some interesting behavior. Blur plus slope plus displacement in a FB loop. You can think of this combo as dispersion. The animation is expanding out from bright parts, anything over the 0 point in the slope, and contracting toward dark parts. Let's make this a little bit more continuous. We can connect a level top to the start null. And put that over the loop. Make sure the level goes into the first input of the overtop. Let's translate the noise with a cheeky little abs time, .seconds times 0.2. Now if we turn the opacity down in the level top to something like 0.1, it just sprinkles a little bit of those values over the loop every frame. Now this is already kinda interesting. Let's move this around. I'm going to use a transform top after the noise. And we can translate X and Y. We can just use a mouse in here. But it's very nice with a leap motion or anything that gives you X/Y coordinates. But let's just use the mouse today. Let's put down a base comp after the mouse in. Let's step inside. And drop down a filter chop to smooth out those movements a little bit. Let's select that filter chop. And let's rename the channels to POSX and POSY. And let's also find out the velocity of our movement. We can use a feedback chop. This gives us the values of the previous frame, and we can use a math chop and subtract the previous position from the current positions to get the velocity. So the feedback goes into the second input and we combine chops with subtract. Let's select that and call it vel X and vel Y. I guess a better name would be delta now that I think about it. Let's merge these. And we are not going to use this today, but it can be good to have. We can drop down another math chop and combine channels with length to get the combined velocity. Let's select that and rename it. And merge it in. Nice. Let's rename this to XY analysis. You can save this talks and use it in other projects. Okay, let's use the POSX for the translate X and the transform. And POSY for the translate Y. Nice. And you can use the period in the ramp to change the size. This is already a lot of fun. But let's keep going. I want the mouse to pull the texture along with it. Let's select the ramp top. And connect it to a constant. We will need this to be 32-bit float R, G, B, A. And this is already multiplying the input by default. Because we need to multiply these values. Let's put the vel X into the red channel. and the vel Y into the green channel. Let's zero out blue. Let's copy and paste the transform and use it here as well. Now if we add this to our vectors, we get some movement, but it's moving in the wrong direction. So let's multiply the values in the constant by -1 to invert them. And now we are pulling the texture along with us. You don't need to do this. But I also like to add a small feedback trail after this. A feedback top. And an add top. And a little level with the opacity set to 0.7. And assign the add to the feedback. And this creates a little trail. You can also add a transform after the select top and scale it down a little bit if you want it to be smaller. Now let's add some curl with a point transform. Drop it down after the slope top. And rotate these vectors along the z-axis by 90 degrees. Now, instead of expanding away from the bright areas and contracting toward the dark areas, we are rotating clockwise along bright areas. Yeah. Play with the period of the ramp, the parameters of the noise, the strength of the slope, and the blur, to get different results. And yeah, we are basically done here. Right now you are thinking, Mr. Salad, this looks nothing like what you showed in the beginning. But right now your TOUCHDESIGNER senses should be tingling. A monochrome texture that you like can always be a height map, where the bright parts represent a high elevation, and the dark parts are low. Let me show you how I do that. Let's make a grid. We can use 2 ramps here. First ramp top. Drag and drop the resolution. And set it to 32-bit float R, G, B, A. Copy paste it, set it to vertical. And a reorder. Green is input 2. Blue is 0. Let's connect this to a null and call it POS. Let's view it as points. Let's center this with a math top. Change the range of the red and green so it centers on 0. Okay, let's drop down another reorder. And a select top. Let's connect a null here at the end. And name it height. Plug that into the select. A math to attenuate the values. And set the output blue as input 2 red. Now it's in the height channel. Let's set up an instancing network. Let's use a box SOP. And set the uniform scale to 1 divided by the simres. This will make sure that all of the boxes are tightly packed like a perfect grid. Connected to a geometry. We need a camera, a light, a PBR material, a render top, let's put this in the background. I'm setting the render to 32-bit float monochrome, 1920 by 1920. Let's turn on instancing in the geometry, and use the position null as translation operator. And let's put the render in the background. Let's turn the light up a little bit. And set it to cone light. Let's set some soft shadows. In the material, let's turn the metallic down. But play around with these. Set up your camera. In this math you can change the height. I like to keep it pretty subtle. We can use the Nunom Botan trick to rotate the boxes. A noise. Output is only noise. Offset 0. And set the amplitude to 180. Monochrome off. And translate this noise by something really small, like abs time, seconds, times 0.005. And drag that into the rotation operator. Turn the roughness down to get that shimmer. Let's add some depth of field. I'm not going to narrate this and instead direct you to Lake Heckerman, link in the description, who has this awesome trick that I use all the time. If you want a cleaner look, you can make the Z-scale in the box larger. And turn off the rotation. You can add a small noise to the positions to stagger the positions a little bit. And yeah, that's essentially it. Have fun with this. And as an excuse for this tutorial being a little bit late, I'm uploading a few variations of this to my Patreon. Like this grass version. And this more normal map version. Anyways, love you all. Sorry for dropping the L word on you. Was that too much? Thanks for watching. And a huge thank you to the people supporting me on Patreon.